not everybody can just grab the church checkbook and start writing checks. The bank should not allow that. Okay? It comes in with the wrong signature on it. Okay, so there's only certain people that can do that. So that's one. These are all, if you will, checks and balances, so that everything isn't going through one individual. Now, we've been at different churches and different things, and sometimes the money, the accounting of the money, isn't real clear. And you know, each quarter we give, Paul gives a report of the funds, you know, how much money has come in, how much money has been spent, where is it being spent at and stuff, you know, matching it up against our budget, you know, just where are we at, how are we doing with that, are we meeting budget, are we not meeting budget? But we have more than one person with eyes on that stuff, okay? If you're ever in a church and you never know what funds the church has. Now, I'm not meaning to be derogatory against anybody, but our little church down in Illinois did not have a very good accounting for its funds. As far as we know, everything was being done orderly and correctly, but we never got an accounting as to what funds the church had, what bills were being paid, where was the money. You know, we didn't get an accounting of the offerings and stuff. And to me, that was always just a little bit off, because you never know where the church was at. I like it a whole lot better knowing that the funds were, you know, above board, if you will, and we know where the funds are, we know where the funds are coming from.
Say that the church never had much money, and the person who was doing that accounting was probably putting money from their own pocket into other costs.
Yeah.
That was the truth.
Yeah. I mean,
they weren't absconding with their money.
As far as we knew, from knowing the individual who was in charge of that, she was probably putting her own money, a lot of her own money in to help cover, which is not really right either. I mean, she wasn't taking money, the church's money, out for using it for herself. She was help covering, you know, she had money, but it's just like, oh man, that's not really the way you're supposed to do it. But again, because nobody knew for sure, that's not good. Okay, you need, and that's why Paul he's sending more than one individual here, somebody else besides Titus, just for to that, so there's no questioning what's going on with the money, where's the money going to. Sometimes. You know, they run ads all the time on TV about giving to different organizations. You know, you can help out, you can give so much per month and all this and stuff. What are they trying to do when they show you those ads? Sympathy. Okay. So should the church use sympathy to get you to give more to the church? You know, huh? Well, if the church is just, you know, trying to play on your sympathy to give money, what's your motivation? Is it to God? No. Is it a part of worship? No.
But you should make known the needs of the church. I mean,
not saying that, we don't. But playing on somebody's sympathies to give.
Or guilt.
Okay. Or laying a guilt trip on them, yeah, to get them to give. That's not what Paul's trying to do here and stuff, and it's certainly not what God has asked us to do. Okay? God wants us to give willingly, knowingly, joyfully, and Paul kind of gets into that there. But this accountability, okay? So Titus is going, and then he mentions the brother who's praised, not given a name, but we talked about the second individual there and stuff. And again, verse 20, avoiding this, that no man should blame us in this abundance, which is administered by us, okay? In the handling of these funds, we want everything to be done above board and correctly so that there's no question about what happened to the money, where is it going to. Verse 21, providing for honest things, not only in the sight of the Lord, but also in the sight of men. So there's no conflict of interest. There's no question about how much money there was, where the money's going to. He wants all of this to be done above board, honestly, in the sight of the Lord, in the sight of men, no conflict of interest. Verse 22, and we have sent with them our brother, whom we have oftentimes proved diligent in many things, but now much more diligent upon the great confidence which I have in you. So here's a third person. Okay? So there's Titus, the brother, and then another individual identified as a brother. And again, we're not given, why weren't we given these guys' names? Huh? Is it important for us to know who these individuals were? No. It really didn't matter, okay?
You know how many names
Now,
you put in there?
as Paul identified these people, obviously the people at Corinth knew who these people were when they showed up, okay? He knew what they were there for and stuff by what Paul had said here and stuff. So it's not really important for us. Why aren't we told how much money was collected by these various churches and sent in?
That's also not important to us.
Did it matter to us?
It says that
Is it really important?
they did it through their poverty.
The churches in Macedonia, yeah, they didn't have much, but boy, did they give, okay? The church at Macedonia, those people had a lot more funds, money available and stuff, so Paul encouraged them to give. But we're never told an amount. You know, the only person whose amount we're told that they gave was a poor widow woman who gave 2 little tiny coins, 2 mites. We would say today 2 penny. That's all she had. But that's what he didn't mention how much, that rich Pharisee was given, making his big show about how much money he's putting in. But he mentioned this poor widow woman who gave 2 little tiny coins. Okay, she's the only one we're really told how much she gave. When Barnabas sold some property, we're not told how much he sold it for, how much he turned over to the church. We're not. Does it matter to us? Well, I need to know all those accounting numbers. Do you really? What difference does that make? Okay. Well, you have to take the money and those, how much it was worth then and convert it to how much it's worth now and, try to figure out. No, it doesn't matter. That's not what the important part is here. The important part Paul's trying to get across here is this is all being done, okay, for these 3 individuals that Paul is sending so that there's no questions, okay? There's no impropriety going on with this money. There's no conflicts of interest. One thing now about giving to some organizations and stuff, where's the money going? I mean, you can get reports about, some of the different organizations, and you look to see how much of what's being given to that organization is going to overhead and administrative costs. And some of them, it's very high. You say, what's going on? Why? I thought we were giving the money to this thing. Well, all these people that are running the show, they're getting paid, okay? So they take their, percentage right off the top, make sure that they get their pay before any money trickles down to what they're actually supposed to be collecting money for. Okay? So you have to be careful in some of those cases. But if we're given to the church, should we have to worry about that? How much is of what I'm given to the missionaries and to the churches, how much is being funneled off of that to go to all these other things? Yeah? Do you know where the money's going in our church? Yeah. You're getting a quarterly report, and it's printed out. And if you got questions, there are people to go to and ask, okay? Hey, what's happening here? Why did we spend money on that? Why are we doing this? Okay. It's a whole process that the deacons and the treasurer and the financial secretary have to go through every year. The deacons get together, we form the budget for the next year. Budget process is always fun, The government needs to really get their acts together and get back on making budgets like they're supposed to, okay? I think the state finally agreed to one, but the federal is still messing around. They're supposed to have a budget, okay? They're supposed to, by the end of September, their budget's supposed to be approved for the next year. That's what they're supposed to be working off of, and they have not been doing their jobs too well doing that. They don't want that accounting is what part of the problem is. But anyway, so Paul's appointed these people, and these other two individuals are gonna travel with Titus as he goes back to Corinth there, and they're gonna work with Titus on this collection, okay? So that as the people put their funds together, okay, they're going to turn that money over to Titus and this group, and then they're going to be responsible for transporting those funds down to Jerusalem. So this is all going to be above board, all going to be done legally, if you want to call it that, so that there's no question about where these monies are going. Verse 23, whether any do inquire of Titus, he is my partner and fellow helper concerning you, or our brethren be required of, they are the messengers of the churches and the glory of Christ. Therefore show ye to them and before the churches the proof of your love and of our boasting on your behalf. Paul's saying these individuals are there representing me and who else? The Lord, okay? These guys aren't just traveling there hey, these guys are collecting money, so let's go get it. That's not what they're doing, okay? They're being sent specifically as representatives from Paul, okay, doing the work of the Lord as Paul has asked them to do, as the Lord is asking them to do, so that as they get to the church there at Corinth, they know what these guys are there for, okay? They have the letter from Paul. They have their instructions. They're working with those individuals that these funds that are being put together for this offering can, in all honesty and without any question, be turned over to Titus and these other two men. and that the people there in Corinth know what's going to happen with that money. Okay? They can really, if you will, trust Titus and the other men to get that money where it's supposed to go. They don't have to worry about where it's going. Okay? Right. Now, Paul used the churches of Macedonia, in the fact that they didn't have much, but they still gave as an encouragement or a challenge, if you will, to the church there at Corinth and say, hey, these poor believers of Macedonia who don't have much, they gave, okay? They didn't have much, but they gave whatever they could. So he used that as a challenge to the church at Corinth, saying, hey, if these poor people can give, y'all that have more, you certainly can give. Okay? There shouldn't be a question of whether you have the funds to do it with. Okay? Now, did Paul ever tell them you have to give a certain amount? No, he didn't. He did try to impress upon them that because you all have money, I know you can afford to. Okay? He kind of puts it that way, but he never told them, okay, you have to give a certain percent. You have to, do this. You have to, every one of you have to put this much money in. No, he never said that. Okay. In chapter 9 here, he's kind of continuing on this theme of giving. He says, as for touching the ministering to the saints, it is superfluous for me to write to you. Okay? What saints is he talking about here? The ministering to the saints. The people they're sending the money to, they're in Jerusalem. That's the saints that he's talking about. Okay? He goes, I don't have to tell you about what they've been going through. The reports, have been circulating through the churches. Those saints there in Jerusalem, you know about them. Okay? Verse 2, for I know the forwardness of your mind, for which I boast of you to them of Macedonia, that Achaia was ready a year ago, and your zeal hath provoked very many. Okay? He kind of was bouncing one off the other because the church there at Corinth, when they first heard about this collection that was going to be taken up, now this was over a year before, they were all for it. Okay? And because of that, the word got back to the churches in Macedonia there that the church at Corinth was going to give to this, and they kind of inspired them, if you will, to give as well. Now, I used it as an example last week, I think, about Camp Kobiak, when they had the kind of a money drive, if you will, to pay off their mortgage, because they had an individual who had told them that if whatever monies churches would put in, he would match to pay the mortgage off, that mortgage off that they had. I think it was several $100,000. I don't remember what the exact amount was. Pastor could probably tell you. But so they kind of sent the word out through all the supporting churches about that, and kind of gave a challenge, if you will, to the churches. So we got together as the deacons of the church, and we set an amount. It was $10,000 that our church would put forth to that. Now, we did that for a couple reasons. Okay? One, we had the money, okay? And we thought it was a very good deal to get that mortgage paid off. But we also kind of threw it out as a challenge, okay, to the other churches. Now, that Paul was doing the same thing here, okay? But we knew that several other churches, if they knew that we were giving that amount, they would be trying to match or exceed that amount. Okay, so if you will, we're playing churches off, the different churches off against each other, putting that challenge out there for them. Well, Paul did the same thing back here with the churches there in Macedonia and with Corinth and other churches that, hey, these guys are given to this, give what you can, so that it wasn't just one church giving money that was going to get transported down to Jerusalem there. It was all these different churches. Now, every church may not be able to give great amounts, but you put all those amounts together and transport it down, it can add up to quite a bit. Okay, and that was the challenge, if you will, that Paul was laying out to them, that if everybody gives a little, okay, when you add all that up, okay, it's really going to help those saints down in Jerusalem that we're collecting this money for. Verse 3, yet have I sent the brethren, lest our boasting of you be in vain for this behalf, that, as I said, you may be ready. This is kind of a challenge back to the church at Corinth. Okay, Paul says, I've been kind of boasting that you guys are giving toward this. Don't leave me hanging here. Okay. Finish the job of collecting the money. Okay. So as he sends Titus back, he say, we're gonna wrap up this project, if you will. Don't leave it just hanging out there. Let's wrap it up, so that as I've boasted to these other churches that you all are giving toward this project, don't leave me hanging here. Let's make sure we collect the money and get this ready. Verse 4, lest happily, if they of Macedonia come with me and find you unprepared, we say, not ye, should be ashamed in this same confident boasting. Okay? Paul says, we have some people from Macedonia that are going to be traveling with this. Paul's plan was to come back through Corinth, and when he did that, he didn't want them to be, the church there at Corinth, to be embarrassed because Paul's been bragging about their giving toward this project. And he says, if we get there and y'all are still not completed with this, it's going to look kind of silly, and y'all are going to be kind of embarrassed, because we've been bragging. And Paul's, ourselves are going to be embarrassed because we were bragging about y'all's participation in this. And we don't want that being that way. Follow through, yes. Verse 5, therefore I thought it necessary to exhort the brethren that they go before unto you and make up before your bounty, and make up beforehand your bounty. Therefore ye had noticed before that the same might be ready as a matter of bounty and not as of covetousness. Okay. Paul says, I'm sending Titus and these other two guys ahead of us. Okay. So that this matter can be taken care of. This collection can be all done. So when I and the rest of my group actually get there, we're not still in this process of trying to get you all, to get your collection finished up, okay? So that when I and the others get there, this is all taken care of. We don't have to worry about it. And we don't have, it's not like I get there and I'm figuratively beating you over the head to get you to finish this, okay? We want your encouragement. You want it done, yes, you're giving to the Lord's work, and it's not any question about why it's being done. Verse 6, but this I say, he which soweth sparingly shall also reap sparingly, and he which soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully. Now, this is actually a kind of a quote out of Proverbs. Okay? What's he talking about, this sewing thing? Is that a needle and thread? Wrong sew. Okay?
Whatever you plant.
You're planting seeds. Okay? Okay. So if you know you don't have much seed, so you sow it sparingly, what kind of a crop are you going to get? A kind of a thin one, yeah. Okay. So if you sow bountifully, in other words, you make sure there's enough seed. Now, used to be when they planted, how did they plant? Yeah, they had a bag and they just threw it out. Okay, they prepared the ground and they threw the seeds out. Okay, if you're planting your garden, you do your rows and you plant your seeds. What if you're planting radishes or carrots? How many of them little seeds do you put in there?
Oh, lots.
Well, I put one little seed every foot. Well, you're not going to get much crop out of that. Okay. No, you plant a lot. Nowadays with the cornfields and that, they have the big planters. They can actually set on the planters how many seeds per foot and then all this stuff, how many per acre and stuff. It's all automated. It's not like the old ones, you dig a little hole, you put some seeds in, you put a couple fish in for fertilizer, That's how they used to plant it. Don't laugh at me. It's how the Indians showed the pilgrims how to plant that stuff, okay? How to make those crops grow, okay? But yeah, it's a different process. But if you don't sow very much, I'm going to save money not by not planting as many seeds. Well, that's what you're going to get back, okay? So you got to make sure you have enough, okay? So sow sparingly, reap sparingly. Sow bountifully, reap bountifully. Okay? Now, in my lesson here, it had a little example. It said a pastor was trying to encourage his congregation to give. So he had mentioned that if they gave, the Lord would return to them tenfold. Okay? So an individual in the church, this is going to work for me, so he gave $1,000. And based on what the pastor said, he was supposed to get 10,000. Okay? He didn't get it. He sued the church because the pastor told him that if he gave money, he would get 10 times the amount back. Where in the Bible does it tell us that if I give a certain amount, God will give me a certain amount back?
It's just about a cup. And it says that if you give out of the cup, that the Lord will give it back overflowing and you won't be able to contain it because it will be so
Yeah.
much. That is what he says. But that's blessings and it doesn't mean
Okay,
financial.
but the same quote that Paul did here, if you sow sparingly, you will reap sparingly. If you sow bountifully, the Lord never says, if you give a certain amount, I will give you so many times that amount back.
Right.
But the Lord does say he will bless us. Okay?
Yeah, your car might not break down.
Okay?
That's really good.
Bag doesn't go holes in it, yep.
Yeah, and your washing machine keeps washing and drying and that is true. Yes, it surely is.
Yep. Yeah, he does.
My mom gave.
Yeah, it is not necessarily also, always, if you give a certain amount, then you'll get a check in the mail for that, returning that money to you and stuff. But the Lord does take care of us, okay? Now, if you want to be stingy about it, what should you expect back? There's always something that comes up that seems to eat your money, what money you thought you were saving. Well, I can't afford to give to the Lord. Okay? I just don't have the money. What usually happens when you get into that mindset?
Things keep causing you not be able to.
More stuff keeps coming up. Okay? You seem to get further and further behind. Okay? What usually happens when you make it a priority to give to the Lord? You can't really, maybe quantify it, but things seem to, hold together better, don't break down as much, or if something happens and you need the money's there. Well, how did that happen?
Yeah, where did it come from? Yeah, you wonder how you made it through the month.
Well,
Still have
you can go back into the Old Testament when that woman and her son had this little barrel of grain, and there wasn't much in there, and she was just going to make a little cake, a little loaf of bread, and eat it. But the prophet asked her to make something for him too.
first.
What happened to that thing of grain? It just kept going and going and going.
It wasn't like filled up the barrel.
No, but every day there was grain in there.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
God is awesome.
God did it. Okay. But if that lady had not been willing to do what the prophet had asked, would that have happened? No. Okay. God takes care of, okay? But she was willing to give. That's that same principle taking place here, okay? Verse 7 of chapter 9. Every man, accordingly as he is purposed in his heart, so let him give. Not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound towards you, that ye always having all sufficiency in all things, may abound to every good work. Okay? How should we give? Oh, I've got to give to the church, They'll know if I don't give my money. Is that our attitude? Should that be our attitude? Certainly not. Okay?
Isn't it wonderful to be able to give, honestly?
The Lord has given to us. Okay?
Everything.
The Lord has allowed us to be a steward of what He has entrusted to us. So we should willingly give back a portion to Him. Okay? Oh, that's my money. I worked for it. Well, did you really?
You did.
Didn't God give you the health
Yes.
and the abilities to work that job, to earn that money? People look at it in different ways. Okay? But it's the Lord's. Okay? If it's the Lord's and He's entrusted part of it to us, shouldn't we willingly give a portion back? Yeah. And what happens when we do?
That cup is overflowing.
Yeah. He meets the needs we have. Okay? Does God say if we give lots of money, then we're going to get rich?
No.
And that isn't a promise? Huh?
That's the truth.
We're laying up treasures in heaven. Okay? Probably not on this earth, but we're certainly laying up treasures in heaven. But it works. Okay? If we willingly give to the Lord's blessing will be upon us. Okay? Verse 9. As it is written, He hath dispersed abroad, He hath given to the poor, his righteousness remaineth forever. Now he that ministered seed to the sower, both minister bread for your food, and multiplied your seed grown, and increased the fruits of your righteousness. Now, when the people of Israel went into the promised land, they planted their fields and stuff, and every 7th year, they were supposed to do something. They were not supposed, to let that land lay fallow, rest, recuperate. Okay. Why did God tell them to do that? Doesn't that sound silly? Not to plant crops for a year?
He said that the 6th year, he'd give them enough to make it through till the 8th year and plant their fields.
Yeah.
If they just obey. Did they do it?
See, there's another part there, okay? But what did allowing the ground to lay fallow for that year? The ground regained its energy, if you will, the nutrients, okay? But God blessed that 6th year's crop so that they would have enough for the 7th and into the 8th year until that next crop was planted and grown. God took care of that for them.
He would have.
Okay?
They didn't do it.
If they have followed the directions they were doing. So sometimes they did, sometimes not. Oh, we're going to have to hurry up here. It says, verse 12, for the administration of this service not only supplieth the want of the saints, but it aboundeth also by many thanksgivings of God. Whereas, whilst by the experiment of this ministration they glorify God for your professed subjection unto the gospel of Christ, and for your liberal distribution unto them and unto all men. And by their prayer for you, which long after you in the exceeding grace of God in you, thanks be to God for his unspeakable gift. What he's trying to tell them is, as you all give toward the saints there in Jerusalem, when they receive your gifts, what are those saints there in Jerusalem going to do?
They're praying for you to be.
They're going to thank God for your gift. They're going to be praying for you all. Okay? They don't know really who you are, but they're going to be praying for these churches that have been helping them and supplying their needs. Okay? So what goes around comes around, if you will. You all are being concerned for these saints there in Jerusalem, and by your liberal gifts to them, you're letting them know that you care for them, that you want them to have God's blessing, and that you want them to have their needs met. And God is using you to meet those needs. Lord, we thank you so much for the opportunity we have to study